Welcome to the OK Let's Learn podcast. This is two podcasts in one where we dive into tons of great stories and books, and another where we just dive into tons of different topics. My name is Kevin O'Keefe. So today, OK, let's learn about DeWitt Clinton and the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal became hugely significant for the development and the success of New York State and New York City primarily as the capital of the world. Commerce, trade, influence, money. The Erie Canal made it all possible. How, you say? Well, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that this island of Manhattan, where there wasn't too many people, would be the commerce capital of the world. And how was it that it became this reality? It was a hole that was dug in the ground, a ditch that traveled 363 miles. That was it. And this was all the idea and the push from a fellow by the name of DeWitt Clinton, the former mayor of New York City, the former governor of New York State, a man that was known throughout the country. His uncle was the vice president of the United States. His father was connected big time to the power brokers at the time. A man that is so underappreciated and had such an impact on the beginning of our country. He created the Erie Canal. The canal, which is the ditch. They called it Clinton's Ditch. They never thought it was going to be successful. It was built in 8 years from 1817 to 1825. It had 83 locks that allowed it to go up hills and down hills from Buffalo to Albany. And ultimately, it was 40 feet wide, only 4 feet deep, but this little ditch basically allowed people to feel confident to go west, just like the steamboat allowed people to go to west more efficiently and more confidently. It was this canal that said to people out west, you know what I can do now? I can not only have a life and sustain myself, but now I can make money. How? By selling everything I make and produce in terms of food, in terms of products, and I can ship them easily east, and people will buy what I make. This became the reality of moving items from east to west and beyond, over to Europe as well. And it's not a stretch to see that the Erie Canal advanced the development of huge metropolitan areas that are still around today and really important. Starting over in the west from Chicago to Detroit to Cleveland, right near Lake Erie, then to Buffalo, and followed across New York State along the Erie Canal. You had major cities that ended up developing and being part of this new highway across New York State. Just look at the map. All these amazing cities, starting from Buffalo, like I said, to Rochester, to Syracuse, then to Albany, and down south on the Hudson River to New York City. Listen, from my previous episode with Robert Fulton and the steamboat, he proved that for the first time, you could have a vehicle that could travel upstream and downstream. This was revolutionary because rivers had always been one-way streets. And now, 18 years later, after the development of the steamboat, the Erie Canal, it connected Lake Erie to the Hudson, and it turned New York City, like I said before, into the gateway of an entire continent. The canal itself did not allow steamboats. It was too narrow and too shallow. And yes, mules pushed these flatboats on the canal, but look at what happened. Both of these technologies, the canal and the steamboat, worked together beautifully. The canal boats carried Western grain to Albany, And from there, the steamboats brought it down the Hudson to New York City and back upstream again with manufactured goods. Hey, if the steamboat made rivers run both ways, the canal connected rivers that had never met, that couldn't meet. They fixed a problem that was huge to developing our westward expansion, our trade and commerce. And again, for my younger members of the audience, commerce is all about doing business. When you do business, you're trading, you're making money, your standard of living, the way you're living is so much better. This became a reality because now you had people of little means that were able to provide for themselves and have a stake in our country. And it wasn't just the rich and powerful anymore. And how about this? For the biggest example to make this clear, before, when you're moving goods, for every dollar you would spend on land, now it basically costs 10 cents to move it over water. Over land, one horse might carry 1 ton. Now in the canal, that same horse could pull a boat that could carry 30 tons. Now, canals have been around for a long time, these man-made waterways. China, thousands of years ago, and especially now in England, there were tons of canals that were helping industry move. But the United States, brand new country, there was an idea, yes, we need canals. But number one, we didn't have the know-how. We didn't have people that were engineers that knew how to build them. Think about this. We ended up bringing some people over from England, and a lot of what you would think would help the development of this was our president, our country. But they did not fund the canals. There was competition as to which areas of the country could benefit, and was clearly selfish in a lot of areas. Wait a minute, no, this canal could help this port, this city. So many presidents didn't favor the canals. As a matter of fact, our president during the War of 1812, James Madison, vetoed a bill that would have brought money to New York. Why? Again, there was favoritism. The federal government didn't want to look like it was favoring one community, one section of the United States over another. So DeWitt Clinton, who was governor at the time, said, you know what, we're going to do it all on our own. He was steadfast, he was persuasive, he wanted it done, but more than anything else, he knew that where he was situated in New York State was the best place to actually move goods across the Appalachian Mountains. That was the big problem. As much as the power centers in Virginia wanted to build a canal to help that area, it wasn't physically possible. Here, if you look at a map, the Appalachian Mountains in this Mohawk Valley, in smack in the middle of New York State, there is this one low natural break in the mountain range, and it's the only one north of Alabama. This Mohawk Valley was like this giant doorway through the mountains, and Clinton understood this. The Mohawk River actually went through this area. But the problem with the Mohawk River, you think, well, you know, let's just have the river transport goods and let's use this steamboat. No, unfortunately, the Mohawk River was shallow in places. It was full of rapids in places. It was frozen in the winter, unpredictable with floods very often, and too narrow, too often for consistent heavy freight to go through. So in the dry seasons, the boats would get stuck. In the wet seasons, the currents were too strong. So the canal solved it because you could move through the mountain ranges right here in New York State, and Clinton took advantage of it. So let's first dive into how exactly this happened. What was Clinton up against? Well, he was up against the fact that starting in Albany, you were almost at sea level, and now you had to climb almost 600 feet all the way to Buffalo. So you encountered Steep climbs, steep falls, huge forests, swamps filled with mosquitoes, muddy ground that swallowed boots. At some points, you had men that worked knee-deep in water that were battling diseases. They didn't have bulldozers. They had shovels, picks, maybe some hand drills, maybe some powder for blasting some of the rock. And as I mentioned earlier, not a lot of experienced engineers that knew how to make these canals. But thankfully, we brought some people over from England, and people stepped forward, and we figured it out, and we had the manpower. Lots of Irish immigrants came over across the Atlantic Ocean and helped build this canal. So, how was it done, especially going uphill? They built locks, 83 of them. What's a lock? Well, it's just like a lock on a door. They locked water in place. So now you had a raft or a boat carrying supplies, and now you had to go up a hill. You would enter an enclosed space, and a wall and a door would close in front of you, and it would then close behind you. You were locked in. You have to think of these locks as like water elevators. If the boat needed to go up, workers would open small wooden gates that would let the water rush in from the higher side. As the water filled this chamber, this area, the boat rised gently, smoothly, like an elevator going up. When the water inside matched the level of the water up ahead, the front doors would open and the boat would float out. To go downhill, they would do the opposite. They would slowly let water out, and the boat would sink calmly to the lower level, step by step, lock by lock. And finally, how about this as an engineering challenge and a problem that they encountered? You had to cross rivers at some points. So they built aqueducts, which are man-made bridges that would carry the water over the water, a canal over a river. And two other amazing hardships that they had to overcome was something called hydraulic cement. It wasn't available in the United States during this time. It was impossible to hold the locks together. It was impossible for cement and stone to stay intact along this canal without this super glue that was a reality in Europe but wasn't available. So they had to import it from Europe along with all the engineers from Europe. But eventually we caught on not only with the know-how with the engineers, but we found natural cement deposits in upstate New York near the canal route that made the hydraulic cement a reality. The canal could not be built without this. And they had natural streams that would be going downhill that would present a huge flooding problem. So they had to build tunnels. They called them culverts. These tunnels would take the water from the streams so you wouldn't have problems with all this water going into the canals. But this was a major undertaking as well. And it helped later on with managing the water with all of the towns and cities that were built up along the route to the canal. These tunnels helped the development because think about it. You needed sewage, you needed drainage, and of course you needed clean drinking water. These tunnels helped with all of that. So we need to talk about DeWitt Clinton. He was the man almost solely responsible for making this happen. It's amazing to think about where New York City would be, where our country would be without the influence of this one man. He was born in 1769, and his family was all about politics and public service. He was born in New Britain, New York, the son of James Clinton. He was a revolutionary officer who became a U.S. congressman and a state senator, and his uncle was even more influential. His name was George Clinton. He was the governor of New York for a long time. He was also in the Revolutionary War, and he was later the vice president of the United States under both Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. So DeWitt Clinton grew up under this influence? Are you kidding me? And listen to this. At age 17, he graduated from Columbia College, which was renamed from King's College. In 1789, just after the Constitution was signed, he gave the commencement speech in Latin. And who was there? The president, George Washington, the vice president, John Adams, and multiple cabinet members. You talk about someone that was on the rise and ready to take power and knew so many important people. This was DeWitt Clinton. Initially after college, he studied law, but then he quickly moved on into politics. He was the private secretary for his uncle, Governor George Clinton in New York State. He then got into the New York State Assembly. Then he moved on to the State Senate. In 1803, he became the mayor of New York City and stayed there for multiple years. And in 1812, he actually ran for the presidency of the United States against James Madison. Imagine what could have happened if he defeated him. But no, he didn't. He came close, but he was defeated. But his greatest stage was clearly New York. The idea of this canal connecting the Hudson River to Lake Erie had been around for years. Most people called it too expensive, impossible, like I referenced before, too wild. President Thomas Jefferson called it madness to think that this could be done. They called it DeWitt's ditch, Clinton's ditch. It was not universally accepted and supported, but he leaned in. As the governor, he used his political influence to push the project forward, but he needed money. And here's the remarkable part that I referenced earlier. He didn't get it from the federal government. He didn't get it from really anybody. Yes, there were a few select rich investors that signed on, but he got it from the average New York State resident. He issued bonds. From my younger members of my audience, a bond is a way to raise money, get money to do something that you want to do. In this case, he needed money to build the Erie Canal, but he was borrowing this money in the promise of paying all the money back to people that would give him money. And on top of that, something called interest, which was additional money that people would get because they lent Governor Clinton the money. This interest would be paid to average people, these investors, over a period of time. And guess what Clinton did? He started the canal early on out in the West where it was simple, it was flat. So immediately he started collecting tolls, which is like Easy Pass today. Again, for my young audience, when you're driving on a highway, it's not free. You got to pay for it. And you do that by collecting something called tolls. These tolls started immediately, so he was able to pay back all the money that people raised through these bonds. And on top of that, the Erie Canal became so successful. Clinton became so popular. Why? Because short 10 years after the canal was built, he paid back all the bondholders, all the investors, all the people that made this a reality. It was a financial success. Clinton was a hero. Clinton was so popular. And when it was finished in 1825, Clinton poured some water into a bucket in Buffalo, made the trip over to Albany and then down to the Hudson River to New York City. And in this little gesture, he called it the wedding of the waters. He poured the water from that barrel that he had from Lake Erie into the Atlantic Ocean, and crowds roared, cannon fires went off. It was a huge accomplishment for the day and so celebrated. Now, as we wrap up the podcast, listen to this. Just as Robert Fulton had become famous shortly thereafter he passed away, the same thing happened with DeWitt Clinton 3 short years after the canal was opened, he passed away. He was governor. He oversaw the canal's expansion and all the improvements. But at age 58, he passed away from a heart attack. The news again stunned everyone. Businesses closed. The church bells rang. He was mourned not just in New York State, but across the country. He never became president, but in some ways, his achievement was better than being president. He helped carve this 363-mile-long water highway across the Appalachian Mountains when no one could do it, no one dared to do it. But by doing this, he put in place the secure foundation of New York City being the cultural, the financial, the economic power of the United States that allowed, well into the future, the United States to be the economic, cultural, financial powerhouse of the world. Friends, thanks for being with me on this journey, learning all about DeWitt Clinton and the Erie Canal. Reach out to me at kevmok21@gmail.com. You can see updates and get together with other people that are supporters of the podcast at my OK Let's Learn Facebook page. And of course, always appreciate any 5-star ratings or any reviews that you could give me on Apple Podcasts. It helps get the word out so other people could listen. But friends, thank you again, like I said. And until next time, have fun and keep learning.